Welcome, everyone, to the State of B2B e-commerce 2026 with Master B2B. My name is Brian Beck. I'm here with Andy Hoar, my partner in our Thought Leadership Series and community of e-commerce executives. And today, we're going to be speaking about the current state of B2B e-commerce this year based on some research we did. We'll get into that in a minute. Andy, welcome. We got an exciting session today.
Yeah, you know what? We do this every year, but I have to believe there's not been a more important year in
Right.
e-commerce than the current one. And not for all the obvious reasons, for more, but we'll talk about that here today.
Absolutely. Well, Andy's my partner in this thought leadership series. We've got some great folks also joining us today. But before we get into that, folks, everyone who has become a part of or is listening here to the webcast will be able to receive a full copy of our State of B2B e-commerce 2026. But for those of you maybe watching later or need to download it, here's a place you can go to download this. You can scan the QR code here. It will also be available on our website. This is brought to you in partnership with Coveo and SAP. We will have some folks from those fine companies on with us today. Um, but exciting times, Andy. And for those of you who, by the way, want to share this, you can share it out through your friends, to your friends, etc. You'll get a copy of this recording as well in your email box, and it'll be available on our website on demand. By the way, folks, you can ask questions and just do that through the Q&A box here on Zoom. We'll get to as many of those as we can. And we've got some great companies, Andy, joining us for this webcast today. I see here Stacy at SureWorks is here, Solventum, Zorro's here, Uline, 3M. So I see Stephen Javor at Schneider. Hey, Stephen, I was just talking to you. S&E, Grasshopper's here, Regal Rexnord, McKesson, Samsung, Jim from Performance Food Service. Yeah, what a great group we have joining us to learn more about what we found. So excited to get into this. We also have some great panelists that are going to be participating in our session. Here's a quick preview of who those panelists are. If you go to the next slide, the folks that are going to be coming in to comment on not predictions. I want to keep saying predictions, Andy,
Friends.
our findings. Yes, thank
Yeah.
you, for 2026. So getting into that in just a minute, but let's go ahead and frame it up a little bit, Andy. We have 8 insights that we'll be sharing about about what's happening. We will ask a lot of questions in this and try to understand the pulse, right? So we're fortunate at Master B2B that we've developed a close group of thousands of people that we can tap into to ask questions. And these are practitioners at manufacturers and distributors across industry segments to find out what they're seeing in different areas and what they're prioritizing in their businesses. So we went out, and if you go to the next slide here on the our approach to this, we did this through a survey, right? So back in January, we issued a survey that we had quite a few responses on from folks like I was just describing to you. We also have our roundtables, our summit, and other things where in-person events where we collect information from our practitioners about what they're seeing in these different areas. And these are principally manufacturers and distributors in the United States and Canada. So it's mostly a North American-based study.
It's
Anything
also
else?
worth
Anything you want to add there?
Well, it's
Yeah,
also
go
worth
ahead.
noting that we live in this world, and so we're talking to people
Right.
constantly. And so when we have our meetings to discuss what we're going to publish for the State of B2B Commerce Report, we spend hours talking through, what have we observed, what have we noticed, what are people talking about, where are the struggles, where are the opportunities. So yes, it's a snapshot in time, but it's based on just ongoing dialogue, which for you and I is almost 24/7, 365.
That's absolutely right. And to frame this up a bit, Andy, we've been talking about digital transformation. If you go to the next slide, for years, right? We've been talking about this for 20, 30 years, and we're really at an inflection point in what's happening in the world of digital and e-commerce and B2B. Andy, you want to speak to that a little bit, and what do you kind of think we're seeing here?
Well, you and I have talked about this many times in that we both hate the phrase digital transformation because
Right.
I think it's essentially meaningless. And so it really, and especially with the technologies that are emerging right now and the business process change that's taking place, I don't think digital transformation was ever the appropriate phrase. The appropriate phrase is actually business transformation because
Right.
these technologies and these capabilities are actually enabling companies to reinvent themselves. I know we hate to laugh about this in the age of digital. That is a real thing. We could quote chapter and verse of companies that are changing fundamental processes. You mentioned I wrote a book about this. I mean, my thesis is that there are these middle miles between the first mile and the last mile in the commerce journey that people overlook or ignore. And that to me is where a lot of this AI is taking place right now and will have its biggest impact going forward. So, I think we're starting to see change within manufacturing and distribution. We're seeing change on the solution provider side, where I think we're seeing insurgents that are challenging incumbents. We're seeing AI native companies all over the place that are upending a lot of what's happening right now. So, and I'm a big believer, by the way, that a new technology times an old process equals an old result. I just don't believe that new technologies on their own change a whole lot of anything. If you don't change how you think about and use these technologies, then you're effectively going to find not much difference. And that's the big challenge. That is the big challenge right now is companies thinking in a different way in order to
Right.
use these new technologies. And I got to tell you, the scorecard so far is not great. I think we're
Mhm.
seeing a lot of companies try things, then either have success or failure and declare it over. If they have a failure, they say, oh, it was the technology that screwed up. No, the technology is not the problem.
Yeah.
That's not the problem. It's probably the way you're using that technology, which is
Well,
the
and
big
this, yeah.
challenge.
And that's really, it's been the story of B2B for years too. And it's fascinating that what's happening here, AI has creeped into has crept into all the different elements we analyzed in the state of B2B e-commerce because, it is really a transformational, piece. I know we don't love that word, but I mean, this really is a serious change in underlying process and technology and things. So let's go ahead and highlight those. What are the 8 areas that we got into here? So what we dove into are different aspects of how B2B companies are dealing with digital and e-commerce. So here's kind of a high punch list, and we're going to get into each of these on terms of what we found. And just to read through these briefly, migrating to digital is getting more complex. Digital leadership skills persist, the gaps persist. AI has moved now from aspiration to action. We were just alluding to that. Ecom metrics are improving across the board, and that's encouraging. We'll get into why that's the case with one of our special guests. E-commerce budgets are growing, which is also encouraging. AI is now the number one investment where those budgets are going. Bad data, though, is preventing growth, and that ties into, of course, AI. And then finally, proving ROI remains the hardest internal sell. So we're going to dive into each of these based on the results we found. And the first one we're going to talk about, Andy, is migrating to digital becoming more complex. So we found in our first here is that, and this is really fascinating, the three most significant challenges. We asked this question. What are the three most significant challenges you face in your B2B e-commerce role? Number one, far and away at 56%, migrating the business from analog to digital centric. This is still, I mean, we're still dealing with internal silos here, Andy, traditional thinking. And the product data kind of follows this, right? I mean, if you look at number two, 46% is reflective of the same thing, right? Difficulty in overcoming some of those legacy processes you were just alluding to. But what's your take on this first of our findings?
Well, it's a little scary here is that they're migrating from the number one priority or challenges from analog to digital. Well, that's like fighting the last war. That war already ended. Honestly, we're into a new
Right,
battlefield now, and,
right,
and quite literally, like what we're seeing in warfare today, like everything is drone centric. That's the
right,
equivalent of saying, "Hey, we have stealth fighters." It's like, well, stealth fighters have been there for a long time. I mean, if you're going from tanks to stealth fighters, the world's into drones now. So
right.
this really is about AI. So if you're struggling still from analog to digital, you're falling farther and farther behind. And I hope this isn't legioned in the space. I have a bad feeling some of it still is that companies are still trying to convince themselves that there's something here beyond just analog and the old way of doing things. I mean, I did see an article this morning actually about how companies are now hiring digital AI leadership. That was it was a
Oh
distribution
boy,
strategy group, and they said
interesting.
they're some of the compensation is approaching $300,000 for mid-level AI leaders, like AI enablement leaders, which
Wow, wow,
that's great,
wow.
but I hope we don't fall into the same track where people say, remember this whole thing about digital? We'll hire somebody to run digital.
Right, right.
And are they going to now hire somebody to run AI? I mean, that's just as kind of silly because AI, just like digital, is embedded across the entire organization. So I can't say this enough. This is an opportunity for
Well,
companies to
yeah.
reinvent how they do business. And it literally is that sweeping. And I just don't
Yep.
think companies are moving quickly enough. And when I hear answers from companies like, well, we're testing, so we're gonna take a year to understand AI. I'm like, do you realize that 1 year of AI is four models of like Claude,
Right, right,
OpenAI,
right.
Gemini, and the fourth model completely obviates the first model as if it was like a baby crawling on the ground versus being in a space shuttle. That's how
Yep.
different the fourth model is from the first model. When you take that amount of time to study something, I'm not saying rush into it, or race into it, but it's got to be just this constant process of experimentation and thinking about, hey, can we do this in a more efficient way? Because, and this is the most important thing, other companies will do this.
Right.
If you don't do it, your competitors will. And that's not just an idle phrase because we know there are PE firms lurking out there that are looking for underperforming assets. They're the ones who are going to figure this one out, and they're going to make sure your competitors are actually using a
Yeah.
lot of these technologies.
And this is all tied, Andy, I think, to number two, which is that we still have a digital skills gap in the leadership. If you go to the next slide, the skills gap persists. I mean, look at this. We asked the question, what level of digital experience does the senior most leader in your organization have? President, CEO. 38% said little or none. 38%. Okay. Little or none. So why are we lagging in some of these areas? And I mean, I'm giving the industry, and I don't know what grade you want to give them, Andy, but we're still at an F here, guys. I mean, this is between this and the last one, and I think this is why the last one is showing what it is. 56% saying just getting the business from analog to digital. This has to come from the top, and we're still at an F here, guys. And the good news is though, for companies that do act, as Andy were just saying, there's real opportunity to create competitive advantage, don't you
And
think?
this is digital. This isn't even AI. Arguably,
I
there's
know.
like if
Right.
we had asked the question, what's the AI leadership skill? I think we'd see even bigger gap. One of the interesting notions here that kind of gets forgotten is that, and we've seen this in the last 10 to 15 years, CEOs have gotten older. Part of it was the
Yep.
pandemic. Part of it is just the kind of constant change. Companies are hewing to this idea that we want more gray hair in these leaders. And this has been studied. This is just a fact that the age of these CEOs has gotten older. And I think that's great, except that just means the same people who didn't understand digital are still not understanding AI, and they're just
Right.
getting older. They may have been very reassuring to Wall Street because they watch the numbers really well, but it's like peacetime generals, all my war analogies, it's like peacetime generals and wartime generals, and they're
Yep.
different people. I would liken this to more of kind of wartime scenario where you need a different mentality where you attack the problem and think about, hey, what happens if we don't have a website in 3 years? I mean,
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
CEOs contemplating that notion? And they should be.
Right. Because it may happen, right? With agentic commerce and everything you document in your book, Andy. How does this manifest? Well, I hear stories of digital teams having to business case things to death again, 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 because the senior team doesn't understand these concepts, and that you have to move quickly on some of these things. Well, but there is hope here, folks. So let's move to our prediction I keep saying prediction, our finding number three. AI has moved from inspiration to action. We have a special guest that's going to be joining us, Daniel McIntyre, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Coveo. Daniel, let me read the stats here and then we can get into, what you do. Look at this. 82% said AI and machine learning for digital customer experience are the most significant impact. Fascinating. Well, Daniel, why don't you introduce yourself first and then tell us what Coveo does?
Sure thing. Thanks for having me. So Coveo, I'm Daniel McIntyre. I work as a product marketer at Coveo. So big part of my job is actually understanding what matters to the market that we're actually serving. And Coveo is an AI search and conversational discovery platform. So for all the use cases that people care about, I'm thinking B2B and B2C commerce, service, website. There's also a workplace component that we're able to actually serve. The idea is to bring all of the data that you've got together so that you can find exactly what you need fast and actually use it.
So you mentioned what Coveo does. Tell us a little bit about your reaction to that notion that, AI and machine learning for the digital experience is the most significant trend in B2B e-commerce over the next 3 to 5 years. How are you advising clients to think about that?
I think it's pretty spot on. I think it's top of mind for everybody. I think there's a notion of, as you were saying earlier, digital transformation is, top of mind, but to us, it's really like that is actually 10 years ago. You have to be really thinking critically about how you're adopting AI because this is just the way technology is developing and it's going, and it's how we are going to be connecting everything in the future. Just because you think you're behind doesn't mean it's a great reason to delay actually implementing or working with AI tooling. And I think there's a bit of a rival fallacy there. So the other component is AI adoption is very vague. So what do you do about it? To me, it's always better to think practical. So what do we actually want out of our AI tooling? Is it better CX? Is it extending your field team, the sales team that's actually serving your customers? Is it making your catalog actually findable as issue number one? So start with kind of the problem that you're solving, and then realizing that you can start to see the actual value while you transform. So AI actually helps a ton with this for example, findability in a search engine, figuring out what your buyer patterns are, finding the content gaps that you've actually got and prioritizing closing those or actually pulling information together. And then while you work on something like taxonomy or updating your PIM, which is these are massive projects, you can still actually move your metrics and see the revenue as you're working on that at the same time.
It really is use
Yeah.
case specific, isn't it,
Yeah.
Daniel?
So I had a question. In Andy's book, Daniel, he posits that the world is moving towards an agentic commerce world where front-end experiences they'll be less, in some cases, less relevant, right? And we think about everyone's focused on digital customer experience. You guys obviously have a search and relevancy solution, market leading. What happens in the world, 3 or 4 years from now when agents are the ones looking for the products, not humans? Have you guys been thinking about that? I'm curious.
We have. I am not a full subscriber to it's going to be all agent to agent. I do think there's going to be some use cases
Yeah.
that are inevitable. I think that's going to be more common in B2B, by the way.
Mhm.
I think in reality, the people that buy are going to continue to be humans because of the way also a lot of different industries, especially within distribution and manufacturing, actually operate. So to me, I do think there's an agentic component that you cannot ignore. The way that we're actually approaching that is to make sure it's folded into our actual product roadmap. So when we say conversational, we are actually talking about an agentic experience that's orchestrated, but the user experience is very clean. You can
Hmm.
throw anything you want at that search bar, but the agents underneath should be able to adapt to that intent and then have a very clean and organized actual user experience that gets you to what you want fast.
That is the big change that you've seen in search, isn't it? That it's no longer just about keywords. It's about people typing whole sentences out or soliloquies and,
Yeah.
you parsing through. I mean, I've heard people just say things like, upload a design spec and say, tear through this thing and tell me what I need in order to create a bill of materials response to this. I mean, nobody would have thought of that as traditional search, right?
Yeah, but I think that's where everything is going. I think with you've got the actual AI platforms like ChatGPT and Claude, and they're completely in a silo, but now people are buying on there or they're starting their commerce search there. So you have to be able to service those needs within
Right.
your site with your search bar. So that search experience should be adapted to intent. It should
Mm,
be driving search adoption.
mm,
It should be able to handle stuff like pricing and entitlements at the query time. And then from actually building a search experience that's intent led, it means that, search adoption is going to increase, therefore search conversion is going to increase. You're going to see your revenue from e-commerce increasing. All of those are the down the line impacts that you can do. We've had a couple customers that have been able to also fold in the really important problem of content into their search, for example.
hmm
So like Dow, ABB come to mind. So you've got
Right.
a bunch of chemical products that you're selling. They've got a lot of technical data associated with them, and your buyers need to
Right.
be able to access that at search time in the same search. And then
Yep.
same thing for ABB. You're buying a robot arm, you need to know all of the technical capabilities it's got, and you've got to do all of that research before you commit to buying something that expensive. And then the sales
Mhm.
team needs to be able to pick that up wherever the user is and finish that sale with the user. So it's a both extension
Yeah.
of your existing team, but then also drive some more self-serve too.
Well said, Daniel McIntyre. We have to leave it there for now. You're moving AI from aspiration to action. We love that. Thanks for your good work, and appreciate you joining us today. Let's go on to our next finding, which is all about, and this is more hope, Andy, for humanity here. Online metrics are improving across the board. Hope for our e-commerce community here. Rence Weintraub. Oh my God, sorry, Rence. Chief Digital Officer at Graco Roberts. Rents, thank you for joining us. Tell us what a Graco Roberts does and what your role is there.
Yeah, good afternoon. Yeah, thanks for having me, Brian. Yeah, Graco Roberts, it's a PE-backed company. We're in the aerospace chemicals industry. We operate globally, and I get to oversee a whole portfolio of companies. So there's pretty much three main websites that make up, majority of our sales. But yeah,
Awesome.
it's an interesting space as a distributor. We provide a lot of products for airlines, as well
hmm
as the military and defense, as well as space programs, the e-vehicle industry. It's quite interesting.
Awesome. Well, we're seeing here that e-commerce metrics are improving. This is our survey results. And Andy, I know you have a couple questions here you want to ask, but I love seeing this, guys. I mean, even, think about conversion rate in B2B. 5 years ago, most B2B companies didn't even know what conversion rate is or was, right? Now we're talking about it, measuring it, and reacting to it. This is exciting. Rents want to get your reactions, but Andy, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, Rents, you said when we talked earlier that traffic conversion rate, AOE, AOV sales, those are the top sort of four that you watch. Which is the most important for what you're observing on a daily basis? What do you need to tell I mean, you're the chief digital officer,
Yeah,
but what do you have
yeah.
to tell the chief executive officer?
Okay, it's hard for me to pick one. But I'll tell you in priority. Okay, the
Okay.
number one is sales. Okay, you need to be talking about sales all the time. When we have little sales spikes, and it shows that we're gonna beat our forecast for the month. I always shoot in a little note to our CEO saying, "Hey, you know, looks like we're gonna be like 15% above target, right?" So that just that just sort of clears the way for your whole week, right? When you do things like that. But kind of to your point, like getting more tactical, Andy. Um, I'm in charge of all of our paid media, and driving traffic, as well as the website and how that's performing. So if I'm looking at two, of course it's traffic that's going on there. We spend quite a bit of money on paid traffic, so that's an important lever. And I'm always looking at the return on investment on the paid channel. There's a whole, we could do a deep dive just on that. But the other one is conversion rate. And that's where I do a lot of double clicking on that conversion rate and really try to unpack it and see what's driving that, not just at a site level, but really at a category and a SKU level and other dimensions as well.
Rents, I have a question on that and sorry, Andy, to interrupt your question, but I'm,
Okay.
I'm always curious about this. I lived in the B2C world as a VP of ecom for
I
quite a
know.
number of years, Rents. Right. And so, when we thought about conversion back in the day, it was always about website conversion. And that was pretty much it. Maybe we drove some traffic to stores. I remember talking about 10, 15 years ago. How are you thinking? How you think? What is a conversion to you? Is it just online ordering, or is it something else?
Well, the first thing I do look at is conversion, but I'm less interested in the overall site conversion at this
Okay,
point. I mean, I do roll that up. I mean, that's kind of what because there's a really convenient math with looking at traffic, conversion rate, AOV.
sure.
You
It's easy.
multiply all those three and it's sales, right? And
Done.
that's a
Right.
framework that you go back to your earlier slide about a lot of the ELT and CEOs just not really getting digital. This just kind of
Right.
gives the broader group, as well as our board, something they can kind of go, okay, I get it, and
Right.
we can
Right.
manage it. But where I'm really focused on is conversion rate, even Brian, getting down to the SKU level.
Interesting.
And in the distribution space, when you think about the role of a distributor, they're aggregating products, right, from all sorts of suppliers. It's kind of our main role. It's like we got to have the product. We need to have the product in stock, ready to buy, and priced right, right? And then you pair that with the traffic coming in. So if you can, really figure out how to tap into demand, optimize your campaigns. Of course, there's the long play of this SEO and all your great email campaigns and triggered emails and that kind of stuff. But get traffic to the site, but you got to make sure it's in stock, and that is where we typically see our conversion rate drop. Is when we're not keeping up with the demand.
Yeah.
So one of the things I'll just kind of I'll share this because it's such a breakthrough for me right now, is we are shifting, and I led this effort. We're shifting from a sales history based purchasing forecast, which is pretty standard in the industry, right? You're like, okay, what did we sell in the past, right? The purchasing teams feel confident. All right, we sold this many units last month or this quarter, so we'll restock. And there's all these considerations about lead time for getting the right products. But what that doesn't capture is how much traffic did we get when the product was out of stock,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
And so we've actually, this is a good AI use case. We recently built some tools using Claude, so custom applications that are now going to start getting new data that can track what's the conversion rate on that SKU when it was in
Right.
stock,
Right.
get that metric, capture how many views we had when it was out of stock, and now we can start shifting to what's called a demand-based
Hmm.
forecast as opposed to a sales history forecast.
Interesting.
And that's going to be a huge way that we drive our conversion rate.
Awesome.
So
That's one of many things, but that's like been really important for us.
yeah, and so I'm happy to announce, hopefully I can say this, friends, that you're going to be speaking to that later this year, hopefully at our Shop Talk Fall event, which we will be talking about shortly. But you and I have gone deep into this, and it's a fascinating new approach and a great example of where you've leveraged a new technology to do things in a different way, right?
Right.
In a better way. So let's talk about budgets. So I think you said something really fascinating when you and I exchanged emails about this. You said because e-commerce is now impacting so many different parts of the business, the budgets for e-commerce have actually gone up because they're touching so many other parts of the business. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, yeah. So um, in traditional B2B businesses that I've been a part of, both as an operator and as a consultant looking in, helping, they're so often, especially in this country, we see these, decades, 100-year-old businesses that, for really the lifetime of that company, 90-95% was built offline. And I think, the digital investment is always kind of seen as like, well, how's that going to improve our traditional business model? And so, that's where you get into those infinite business cases, Brian, because it's kind of like, then you got a lot of stakeholders in the company still that are the rainmakers that aren't digital, and they're like, well, we don't know if we really want to do that, it doesn't really make sense, and is it actually helping
Right.
our this side of the business better? So, but I think what's finally happening is because of the need to always grow, um, there has been this pivot where I think at the board level now, you have at the board level, they're saying we need to be online first. And
Hmm.
it's kind of getting pushed down from the top. And I think some CEOs too are waking up to that. I think all these decades, yourself, Andy, we go way back, when you were, an evangelist at Forrester talking about, the death of the salesman, right? That it's all shifting online, right? And I think, I think finally from the top, it's getting pushed down. And so what that means is online first, then people start looking at the business differently, like you said. So people start thinking about, well, if we're going to improve even our offline sales, what does that look like? Something that I've been able to shed light on at my organization is a new way to think about customers and sales, and that we need to move away from counting sales in offline and online because it's the same customer. And so what we're starting to look at, this is where the sweet spot is, and this is where the magic's starting to happen, is omni-channel, or however we want to call it. But it's B2B customers are moving seamlessly between online and offline with the same company. And that's really what you want, right? You want, if there's a high touch consultative sale, make sure you got the right customer service account team, to do that. But that should only be happening like once a month, once every 2 months. The rest of the time, they should just, those same customers should be buying online. And so it's really about the synergies of the two. And I think it's things like that, like really understanding the customer journey and and then all the interconnected parts of the company from like operations, supply chain, IT, um, you know, business intelligence systems. I mean, everything. Uh, it's about having the people that control the money.
Yeah.
You,
Yeah.
realize that and realize how interconnected it all is. And so, I'm fortunate enough to be in an organization where we are online first, and that was one of the reasons primary reasons I joined the organization. But it's been great because we are all hands on deck. Our biggest initiatives in the company are all about online.
Customers have been channelless for years. Companies have always been channel first, and they've always had like, well, how's this going to benefit our offline, environment, or what are our
Yeah.
salespeople going to think about this? And customers are like, I never met a customer who woke up that morning and said, I'm going to buy in the online channel today. They don't care. They're buying from Greco Roberts. It
Right.
might mean online for the research, offline for the buy, through the customer call center for repurchasing. Who knows, right? But we've talked about this omni-channel thing for years. I just think that customers are way ahead of companies, and it's good to hear a company like yours that seems to be catching up with it. But on that note, we have to let you go, Ren.
Absolutely.
We want
Yep.
to keep going here. So thank you so much
Ren.
for joining us. And Brian, why don't we bring in our next victim?
Yes, yes. Thank you, Ren, so much. That was fantastic. All right, so now we're going to talk about investment priorities, and we're going to bring on our special guest, Megan York, Global Head of Product Marketing at SAP CX, our partner in bringing this research to market. Megan, hello, and why don't you tell us a little bit about you and your role and what the heck SAP is for someone who's been living under a rock?
Living under a rock. I know, I was gonna say. Yeah, hi. Thank you guys for having me. I'm Megan York. I lead product marketing for actually our commerce products, which live in the customer experience line of business at SAP.
Awesome. So we asked our community, Megan, what are your technology investment priorities for 26? And what's fascinating, of course, and maybe not surprising, is that AI, came out on top here. Other AI tools and technologies, 55% was number one. And so maybe not surprising, other at the expense of some other things. But my question, and Megan, want to get your reaction to that, and also, my reaction to it is a bit of, hey, are we leaving some other foundational things off the list, just to focus on AI because it's the shiny object and the thing that the CEO and the board are talking about. What's your reaction to that finding here?
Yeah, when I read through the report, I wasn't shocked to see it at the top of the list.
Right.
We see a lot of our customers are at the point where they're really moving from AI pilots to more mass adoption within their organizations, which intrinsically then I think means higher needs for budgets. The thing that did shock me really was the disparity between, AI investments and then data hygiene or data health investments. I think that they were three or four away from each other. And in my mind, those two things are so tightly coupled because, the success or the the results of the AI, what they can do for you are highly dependent and predicated on the health of that data. So that was one, interesting point of which I think my next speaker probably has something to say
Yes.
as well.
Yes.
One of the things also that was brought up in the report was the investments in the e-commerce platforms, are going down, maybe like you said, Brian, at the expense of AI. And this is already mentioned a little bit, but I couldn't help but think that that was probably because this market notion of agentic commerce, that the front end is going to be taken on by agents, it won't be needed anymore. And someone alluded to this already, but we really don't agree with that perspective at all. I mean, we know that the discovery on the LLMs is going to be so important, but we also see the agentic work on the vendor side is going to be just as important in creating that customer trust and loyalty and all of those things that ultimately drive profitable growth. You'll have agents that give better customer experiences. You'll have agents that are more executing, making sure that, orders are getting where they are on time, and there are issues in the order fulfillment process that are being flagged or even taken care of by agents. And then those optimization agents that are the learning at all times and seeing how to better process, how processes can be optimized and feeding those insights back into it. So those were just kind of some things that were top of mind for me when I saw, where people's investment
Yeah.
priorities were.
It's fascinating to me. I mean, it's almost, Megan, that should we even be thinking about AI as its own bucket, right? I mean, it's, go invest in AI. Well, what the heck does that mean? I mean,
Yeah.
AI can be so many different things. And, at SAP, you're baking AI into all aspects of what you're bringing to market, right? I mean, it's not really, if you're investing in SAP, you're investing in AI, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. At Sapphire this year, we introduced the idea of an autonomous enterprise where, the applications become kind of that infrastructure layer of your
Oh,
business. Then at SAP, especially we're bringing together all of the data from across the business. So, that's one of the things where we see as a real strategic advantage, not just for us, but for our customers who are using our products, is that,
right.
the AI is not just working on the data that lives in one little silo of the business.
Yeah.
It's really able to look at that across, Renz was talking about the importance of having things in stock and how that important that is to his forecast. Also, so important, things like the customer experience. You don't want to keep marketing products to your customers that they can't ultimately come back to your site and buy. And
Right.
that's where, that intersection becomes between, all of the agents kind of driving the personalization on the kind of the customer experience angle, but how important is the data in the back end communicating with that? So, ultimately that personalization can occur with the biggest
Yeah.
data possible.
No, that's fascinating. I think we're gonna bring you back in just a minute, Megan.
Oh,
So hang tight there. Don't go anywhere. We want to talk about our next one, and then we're going to circle back to get your reaction there. Our next is all about data quality and exactly what Megan was just alluding to. Underneath all this stuff, we found that bad data is the biggest barrier to growth. 30% as people said personalized product experiences can contribute up to 30% of e-commerce revenue and lift conversions. But if we don't have good data underneath this stuff, it's not going to work. Rudy Abbott Ball, B2B e-commerce operator, human after all, longtime practitioner, B2B or Master B2B Nexus expert advisor. Rudy, welcome. Tell us what you do in your world and let's get your reactions to this. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. So, as you mentioned, I run Human After All, which is my consulting practice based in Miami and Montreal. And I work mainly with B2B distributors, manufacturers, and really I work with them on product data, payment, e-commerce, and increasingly, we keep mentioning it on Geo. So buyers already asking about the products on ChatGPT and the others, and that's where I'm here to help. So I know that there's a lot of conversation about agencies, but and the way to operate, but most consultants deploy the system. I tend to have been the one who's been operating it for now 18 years,
Right.
including 5 at
Right.
Sonepar.
That's right. You're Sonopar. That's right. And then AMG Medical and some other places.
In Lumen,
Yeah,
he was
Lumen
at
is
Severance.
Sonepar for Quebec.
Right.
There you go.
So, Rudy, I have a question for you. We talked about this in the past. I want to hear your thoughts on it about I have a theory that people don't ascribe independent value to product data. They still don't. They think it's data that will be interpreted by, in many cases in B2B, a sales rep. But when it's out there in the wild, wild west competing on its own for attention, it has to have independent value, right? Because we continue to hear from companies about data is really important, but they don't see the investment dollars line up with the relative priority. What do you tell clients, and what are you hearing about that?
Most of the time, even the report we keep mentions it, is that they kind of know that the data is bad, but everyone kind of hope of within the miracle of AI. Well, AI can fix it quickly and kind of resolve all my problems. So what most of the time is that they don't understand what kind of problem it is. And for decades, B2B companies really never believed the data like had independent value. So it was always like kind of the human in the loop, a sales rep or customer service pointing to the problem or explaining to the customer the difference. And right now, there was always someone bridging the gap. And what changed is that the data got treated kind of two ways, and both are wrong. So the cost center, where you kind of spend reluctantly, and at the same time you have looking at it as a project with a start date and an end date. You fix it once and that's it. But as you said before, like a new technology times, and you have the old process that equals another results, and companies are buying more and more AI on top of the same broken data process. So there's not going to be much difference right there. So the consequence is bad data is the number one barrier to growth, but at the same time, bad data hygiene is the for investment priority. See, the kind of the difference is that at 55%, data hygiene is 35. So that surprised me a bit, and that's not a knowledge gap. For me, it's more the mental model problem, and what we're doing pretty much is buying the engine before the fuel.
Well, until it becomes the priority, we're going to keep talking about this. We've been talking about this for decades. It's crazy. So, Rudy, you walk into a new company. You've been an operator. You know what it looks like at the other side of this to have clean data. Where do you start? I mean, I think to a lot of people, it feels like an overwhelming problem, something that never goes away. I mean, what's your one piece of advice to practitioners here that have said this is a priority. I need to solve it. What do they do first?
Well, the number one is I tell them to stop treating it as a project. Okay.
Okay.
It's really data, it's an operation, it's part of everything. So, again, Andy made the point before is that 1 year of AI, it's kind of for model generation, and the fourth obsolete, the first, etc. And the thing is, durable investment, not only on that AI model, but really on the data layer, making sure that you integrate kind of the DNA of the company within your AI models in your improvement for the data. But more importantly, is that concept of garbage in and average out. If AI is a commodity today, and you keep using it as every other competitor, well, your outcome will be pretty much the same. So you need to go back one step and say, well, how can I infuse properly the DNA of the company? All the knowledge that I've made our company successful for years, can I bring it into my data and share really my expertise so that AI tools that have been growing can interpret and show my company on more results and get that recommendation needed.
Awesome. Awesome. That's good stuff. Well, and this has real business results. If we go to the impacts, if we go to the next slide here, and Andy, you studied this in your book. Poor data maturity can erode up to 20% of revenue through mispricing, inefficiencies, and lost opportunities. You found that, Andy, in bot to bot.
Yeah,
It's a
companies don't get this. They know in vague terms, but to see an actual number, I mean, Rent's referred to it, Rudy's referred to it. Megan's touched on this. If your data isn't good, it's a stopping point, right? If you're stocked out of something, you can't sell it. So,
Right.
but people don't, I think they've just assumed that reality. This is one of those mental model shifts that They
Right.
just assume stockouts, they assume breakage, they assume all this other stuff. But imagine for a moment if that wasn't necessarily the default condition.
Right.
Then you look at numbers like this, where you're losing
Right.
perhaps 20% of your revenue through this stuff. I think
Yep.
people would prioritize something. If 20% of your revenue was being stolen because people were
Yep.
breaking into your work, you think you'd put in a security system, right?
Right. Right, exactly. Well, Rudy, thank you. For time's sake, we've got to move on to our final
Always a pleasure.
finding here. But Rudy, thank you. You've been fantastic. And Andy, I think this does tie back, to our final point here. This also comes back to the ROI question, and tech purchasing and proving ROI. We found in our study remains the hardest internal sell. We're going to bring Megan back in on this to get her reaction. 36%, Megan, of B2B companies said the biggest challenge to using Gen AI in their business is that data is different systems, et cetera. So the proving AI of that, proving AI of the data challenge we just found, that we just reported on, that Rudy was commenting on. What are your thoughts on this? Is ROI hampering, proving ROI hampering all these investments still? Why are we still talking about this if digital is so important now?
Well, I think maybe Brian, you or Andy alluded to a little bit earlier, but I think we're having the wrong conversation, especially when it comes to AI. I mean, the
Right,
conversation shouldn't ever be about the technology. The conversation should be about the business problem that's being tried, that
right.
the company's
Yep.
trying to solve, and how can
Mhm.
technology help solve that business problem versus let's go, pull the newest, shiniest object off the shelf and see what we can do with it in hopes that it impacts our business somehow. I've been lucky here recently to work with customers like Trek Bikes and Riddell Sports and Ericsson, who have both B2B and B2C
Mhm.
sides of their business. And I think it's really interesting across all three of those companies. They all run these sort of tiger teams that include people from the business side and also people from the technology side. They have executive buy-in and investment in the structure of these teams. They are raising up to those executives what they feel are the biggest problems in the business, right? At any moment. And then they're
Right.
looking at how technology and most specifically AI, but not only AI, can help solve those problems. And so, the metrics, the success measures, all of that are really decided in the beginning.
Yeah.
Then the
Mhm.
technology matches up to that rather than starting with a technology conversation. I think that's especially in AI. We saw a lot of AI pilots fail because they were sort of just using AI for AI's sake and weren't
Right.
necessarily lining up to
Yeah.
business problems that could be solved. So I think we just have to re-engineer the conversations we're having in our organizations, making sure there are people from the business and the technology teams all out there at the table, making sure that executive investment is in there from the beginning, and then doing the solution and measuring how successful we were.
Yeah, can I point some out? So that 36% number, that came from a study that we did with you
Yeah.
about 2 years ago.
Yeah, that's to the data point that we keep talking about. I mean, that's the single biggest. For as long as I have been doing customer experience, which is longer than I care to admit, data has been the single barrier to, customer experience success, since the beginning of time. And so, I think the AI, AI initiatives are sort of pushing that conversation within the organizations of how do we bring that data together. And again, as part of all of those conversations that are being had around business problems, I think that's also important to define is what is the data that has to come together for us to be able to make an impact in this area of the business. And even looking at data projects or, that way,
Mhm.
again, not just doing it for the sake of, oh, we'll have better AI, but saying, we can close the gap in time we have from the initial conversation to when that customer gets a quote if we bring these data sources together and we, layer these AI
Yeah.
models over the top of that data. That's a very different conversation than, you know, trying to work across aisles to bring data together just so we can, have this like, kind of pie in the sky idea of what AI can do or even what customer experience can do for your business.
So Megan, you offered a solution earlier in what you said, I think, to the next, if you go to the next slide here, to the number one challenge that companies have in gaining or proving ROI. We asked the question, what are the biggest challenges your organization faces in making commerce tech purchasing decisions? Number one was aligning business priorities with technology capabilities. It seems that, maybe you said AI for AI's sake, technology for technology's sake. Is that what's happening here? I mean, this was surprising that this is still something that is an issue here. I mean, you'd think tech and business were can get along these days and align. What's your reaction to that?
Well, at the basis of all of our companies are people, and
Right.
no amount of technology or people investment are going to change, cultural issues that might be happening or, things like that. So I think that organizational structure and culture is always a question, when it comes to alignment across the company. But
Yep.
like I said, citing those three customer examples, I mean, I can't drive home more that across all of these customers, that's what we're seeing is that the technology people, the business people, they're coming together to, like I said, solve that
Yeah.
business problem that is almost department agnostic. At the highest
Right.
level of the company are saying, this is the impact we can make if we, came together and brought, the needs of the business with the possible technology needs. And so, I think first you got to bring the people together and create a culture where that's sort of the expectation, and then put the process and then the technology behind that for those things to come together.
So Megan, you're taking us all the way back to our first findings here that we talked about in our State of B2B e-commerce, which is the skills gap, closing that. So you're offering us hope that that's closing, which is great.
It
Thank
is
you. Some of
working
the
lots of places. Yes, it
Yep.
is.
That's wonderful. Thank you for highlighting our last finding here and leaving us in a positive note. So thank you, Megan, very much. Great comments.
Thank
We
you
got
for
to leave it
having
there
me.
for time's sake, but thank you. Awesome. So Andy, a couple quick announcements before we wrap up for our findings on State of B2B e-commerce for this year. Number one, want to remind folks about our Master B2B Nexus program. This is if you go to our website, this is your personal digital lifeline. You can find out more at masterb2b.com. We are offering both placement, of expert consultants, on demand consultant or advice to you based on a panel of wonderful Master B2B experts, including Rudy, who was on the call earlier today. He's one of our Master B2B experts. I can help you with data and other things. Anyhow, take a look. It is a paid service for practitioners, and you can find out more on our site. Also, folks, we have a wonderful forum that if you're not a member of, if you go to the next slide, you can find folks like this who attend our events and go to our forum as well. It's free for practitioners. It's practitioner only. And here you see rents there at the bottom of the row. Excellent. And also want to remind folks, we have a weekly podcast called Friday 15. And we talk about issues like the ones we've been covering here every single week. Andy and I talk, and we try to do it in 15 minutes. Obviously, we don't, we go to 20, as many of you know, with some frequency, 25 sometimes. But anyway, we cover these hot topics you are dealing with, and we have that recorded every week. You can listen on your favorite podcast service, and please give us reviews for those things. I want to remind everyone that this webinar will be available to you in a recorded format after, and we'll send you a link to that. Andy, any final words before we wrap up our State of B2B e-commerce 2026?
Yeah, we're going to put a slide on screen here to close out where people can download the report. But, I do really think you use the phrase inflection point. After writing the book, I've become more convinced that we're going to start to see greater bifurcation between high and low performers, just like we're going to see in the organizations where people
Yeah,
embrace AI and use it properly, not just to replace them. I'm not suggesting that, but to turbocharge their
yeah,
capabilities, to put them on go from average to extraordinary. We're going to see the same thing with companies. And so, I just like you put a turbocharger on a car, it's going to go significantly faster than the car that doesn't have a turbocharger. And so if you are a company out there that thinks you can rest on your laurels or take your time or, work it into your existing processes, keep this in mind. Your processes might be the biggest impediment here.
right,
And so
right.
people fall back into, we've been doing this way for years. We've been successful doing it this way for years. Maybe so. But I think it's high time to take a broad look at all of your processes, your culture, your behavior, because ultimately none of that stuff matters. It's all a means to the end of selling products to customers. And if those customers decide that they found a better way to do this,
Yep.
or you're too slow, or you lack information, or somebody's just better at it than you are, loyalty and $5 will get you a cup of coffee in the age of AI.
As I say in the first chapter of my book from 5 years ago now, Andy, your time is now. That's the title of my first chapter. And I know you have a great book that's now available on Amazon. So check out Andy's book, Bot to Bot. My book is $1 Billion B2B E-commerce. Guys, thank you everyone for listening. Thank you to our panelists. It's been an exciting session. And we will see you hopefully on our next Friday 15 and an event around the corner from you. Thanks, everyone. We'll talk to you soon.